Welcome everyone back with another great video on CPP. We got lots of questions on CPP.
Always.
Very popular
Always.
topic, and we want to go over some strange details, two strange details about CPP, but they're important. Before we dive too much in, we always have to mention CPP, usually not the driver or
No.
financial plan. Rarely is it going to be, can I retire at 61? Isn't it depend on when I take CPP? That's usually not the case.
No.
CPP usually is secondary factor. Still important, but is lower on the decision tree when it comes to retirement. However, if someone does not have a defined benefit plan, let's say they don't get that guaranteed pension, they're rare these days. Well, CPP could have a greater influence in that case. Also, if you don't have a huge pot of savings,
it could have a little bit more influence on you as well.
and most folks are in one of those two scenarios. So we want to go over these quirks and see how you can maximize your CPP. Let's go with the first quirk.
Well, the first quirk is the continuing contributions. Now, prior to the age of 65, if you're working, it's mandatory. So if you decide at 60 you want to take your CPP, but you want to continue working, you are still going to have to contribute. You cannot say, no, I'm collecting and I don't have to pay anymore. Up to the age of 65, it is definitive. You will be contributing to CPP if you work. Now, you will get an enhanced benefit down the road because you're contributing more, but you have to contribute. Now, after the age of 65, though, you have the option. Now, if you don't do anything about it or file, then you're going to continue contributing to CPP. But if you're working after 65 and you file what's known as a CPT 30 form, then what you can do is you cannot have to contribute. You can still collect, you'll still be getting everything that way, but your contributions working after the age of 65 won't apply. So this is the continuing contribution rule that really you need to know about depending on when you're taking your CPP.
Yeah, and often accountants are aware of all these forms, so they may do it on your behalf, but just something to be aware of. We're going to spend the bulk of the second of this video talking about the second item, which is inflation. How does inflation impact CPP? How does it differ if you're collecting versus you're not collecting? How all that could kind of pile into your decision of when to take CPP.
Yeah.
It is a big influence. Inflation impacts CPP in two main ways. We're going to start with if you receive. So you're collecting CPP. Pretty straightforward. If you're already collecting your benefit every year, usually in January, you're going to get a top up for inflation. Now, they're going to use Statistics Canada's numbers, and they're going to use a price-based inflation. Statistics Canada won't go into all the nuances here, but effectively they got a basket of goods, and you say, well, how does the price of the basket of goods change year to year? And more or less, that's their price-based measure. And you can see here, there's examples in January 2020, CPP benefit increased by 1.9%. In 21, it went up by 1%. You had a larger adjustment in 23, 6.5%.
That's right.
24, also a larger adjustment, 4.4. The most recent one, 25, 2.6. You can get the idea here. Price-based measures calculated by Statistics Canada. If you're not collecting, it does get inflation adjusted, but it's more nuanced. It's a different measure, and there is going to be some calculations.
Yeah, so I mean, if you are still contributing to CPP, now the maximum annual pensionable earnings, which is sometimes known as the year maximum pensionable earnings or the YMPE, now this is adjusted based on wage inflation, not on price inflation, but wage inflation. So it's two totally different scenarios. And using that percentage, it's an increase, the 12-month average of the average weekly earnings, industrial aggregate sort of scenario. Again, it's all done by Statistics Canada. We don't want to get too involved in what it is, but you'll always just look at the YMPE is what you want to deal with. Now, their examples of increases are a little bit different. They're dealing with numbers. So in 2020, we had 58,700. 2021, it went up to 61,600. But as you can see, as you started getting further in, 66,600 in 23. And by the time you get to 25 now, it's 71,300, which is a substantial increase from where it was just 5 years ago. So that's where we start to see where the inflation is afterwards. They're dealing with wage inflation, not price inflation. And that's a big difference because it can have some really serious effects down the road.
Yeah, and YMP, they changed CPP. They added a new measure, phase 2, which started in 2019. So there's actually two ceilings. We're going to focus our attention on the first ceiling, which is the YMPE. That apply to most folks that are in retirement or about to retire.
That's right.
The YMPE, that's how much you contribute to CPP. Once you have income above that threshold, well, you don't really contribute anymore, at least for the basic pension. And that YMP is going to be used to calculate the inflation factor for the maximum. Again, that gets inflated based on wage level.
That's right.
And then what is the max CPP anyone can get for the basic pension? Well, they're going to use the YMPE. What they do is they actually take a 5-year average of the YMPE, and then they take 25% of that.
That's right.
So what are the last 5 years of YMP? Average is about 25% of that. That's going to determine the max you can get for your basic CPP, what the max anyone will be able to pull out. And 25%, because it's intended to be a complement or a supplement. It's not meant to give you all of your income in retirement.
Not at all.
The basic is 25%. Again, in 2019, they changed that, and there's going to be a second CPP level there that goes to 33%, but we're looking at the basic. And the idea here is how that maximum number increases is going to be based on wage inflation versus if you're collecting, it's going to be based on price inflation. Now, we'll show why that matters here with a big table.
Yeah, so I mean, if you take a look at the table, you can basically see it's divided up. We've got our years adjusted sort of from 2011 to 2025. You get the CPP CPI increase, and then, of course, you look at the maximum benefit, and then what's the percentage versus the previous year. So as you can see, in most years, if you're on that percentage increase per year, you're getting that higher number. All the time, it seems to be a bit more of a percentage going on, but there are anomalies no matter what happens in that time. If you look at 2023, for example, CPI is up by 6.3, but the percentage increase from the previous year is sort of 3.4%. So as we can say, percentage increases per year, a little different than what you're getting out that CPI index.
Yeah, the wage-based inflation, which impacts how much the maximum you'd get through basic CPP, that tends to go up by more on average, not in every year. In years where we have a spike of inflation, well, the price-based measure would probably be higher. So those collecting CPP might get a benefit, but on average, those not collecting, the inflation-based and wage-based inflation would usually be higher. And that's the idea here. So the maximum CPP benefit at age 65, it went from about $960, because we use the 2011 number, all the way up to $1387 in 2025. So you can see a 44.5% increase.
That's fairly helpful
over that time frame. Or if you just had the CPI you're collecting and you get these price-based increases, you got 36.6%. You can see it's a bigger number. That's the whole idea here, is that the wage-based inflation is usually higher on average than the price-based. So you get a bigger benefit for an inflation adjustment if you're not collecting versus if you are collecting.
Yeah.
That's kind of the big takeaway there. We're going to go into how that impacts your decision of when to take CPP, how the strange quirk can impact your retirement. But first, if folks have questions, how do they get answers?
They go to chatwithclintonandkevin.com. You've got questions on CPP or any of these details or anything else in your financial matters, please send them up to us and we'll get back to you quickly.
Yeah, so let's do an example here. Let's meet Cynthia and see how this inflation detail can impact when you take CPP.
Yeah, so if we assume that Cynthia is 60 in January of 2020 and she qualifies for maximum CPP, which at the time was $1175 and change. She takes CPP at 60. So first off, she has a 36% penalty. So that means she's going to receive $752 and change because we do whatever the calculation is, you can see. Now, here's the big thing is, what if she waited until 61 to do it? Let's do a comparison taking it 60 as opposed to taking it 61. As we can see, if she started at 60, 36% penalty, gets 64% of the max, that's $752. In 2021, at the age of 61, she will get an adjustment for inflation. And in 2021, that adjustment, as we see, is a 1% adjustment. So that gives her $760.06. That is what she's going to get based on the fact that she took it 60. This is what she gets at 61. What if she waited till 61?
Yeah, so instead of just collecting and then getting that price-based inflation adjustment, if she just waited, well, it'd be less of a penalty, right? You get less of a penalty if you wait. In addition, the maximum CPP would go up. And remember, that one's going to get influenced by that wage-based inflation, so a different inflation calculation. So she gets 28.8% of the penalty, so a smaller penalty.
Yep, which is nice.
In a larger amount of a bigger number because the max also went up. So
that's right.
Two-factor item here. So she ends up with 857 and a little more, 857.07. So less penalty and the maximum benefit went up. By waiting 12 months, she ended up with 12.76% larger pension. So often when people think about, well, if I defer, I get less penalty, and they think that's the only factor. Not the case. That's the takeaway here. The little quirk with inflation of the fact that when you don't collect, it gets inflated by a different metric usually means the inflation metric is going to be higher for not collecting versus collecting. That does make a difference. It actually incentivizes deferring because you get a bigger bonus now by deferring.
Yeah, so it's twofold. Not only are you paying the penalty, but you're getting that wage inflation as opposed to price inflation. That's going to have a huge benefit. So as we say, CPP should work within your overall plan. And remember, as we discussed in the beginning, it's more of a secondary scenario. Rarely is this the top item that you should be dealing with. But in many cases, I mean, by delaying, as we've said, you can increase your government pension benefits, and it allows you different tax strategies for your RSP and things along those lines, which are definite considerations. But basically, what do you have to do?
Of course, all this has to work within your plan. You need to have a plan. That's the Becker Orr mantra. In addition to Plan Assurance, we also have a newsletter.
Yes, we do.
So like tips like this, click on the link in the description to sign up for the newsletter. And if you like this video, you're certainly going to love the video talking about CPP, 4 CPP misconceptions.
Ooh.
Click on that video. We'll see you again very soon.
Take care.